Man, there is no better way than to start off with a little bit of Iron Man. That's what I want to start off with tonight. I want to start off with talking about Tony Stark. And if you've not seen any of the Marvel movies, I'm sorry. I will do my best to catch you up. But Tony Stark is probably my favorite character in the Marvel comics, in the Marvel movies. I love him not just because he's entertaining, not just because he's Iron Man, but I love the evolution of his character. For those of you who've never seen it, who've never seen any Marvel movie, first off, get out from under a rock. Come on, they're good movies. But Tony Stark starts off as this guy who is completely self-absorbed. Someone who is all about himself, all about the way that other people see him. He wants to be the best at everything. He wants to be the smartest, the best creator, all that stuff. But then, through a series of events throughout 10 years of movies and 20-plus movies in those 10 years, you see this evolution of his character where he shifts from someone who's completely all about himself to someone who will suddenly lay down his life for everything and everyone else, not caring about himself, but others. And I love not just that evolution because it's great entertainment, but I love it because I know in my life, when I was younger, especially in middle school, high school, beginning college, man, I was self-absorbed. I was all about me. I wanted everyone to look at me. I wanted to be the best. I wanted everybody to see me above the others. I was all about me. I was incredibly narcissistic. Now, I'd like to think I've made a cool transition, and I'd like to think I'm like Tony Stark. Obviously, I'm not rich, or I haven't made an Iron Man suit, as cool as that would be. But I'd like to think, spoiler alert. Anyways, I'd like to think that I character-wise, have made a lot of the same evolutions that they have. But the issue is that I'm sure you guys are like this too, where you want the approval of everyone else around you, whether you admit it or not. You want your friends to approve of you. You want your parents to approve of you, your coaches to approve of you, whoever follows you on social media to approve of you. We seek the approval of everyone around us, again, whether we admit it or not. Our friend groups are probably the number one group among that because our friends are there when we're upset. They listen to us. They give us advice, although it can be really dangerous advice, just to be honest, because when I was your age, I used to seek advice from people my age, and it's a little bit like you need to change a tire, okay? But you don't know how to change a tire. So you invite your friend over who also doesn't know how to change a tire, and then you talk about changing the tire. You talk about how great it would be to change the tire, but at the end of the day, somebody still got to change the tire. We need experience from people outside of our friends. And if the only people that are talking to us and giving life into us is our friends, we really need to expand our horizon. The same is true about our coaches, our parents, our teachers. We love those people because they push us harder than anybody else. However, sometimes, again, if we're honest, it feels like maybe they have their own agenda. They don't seem to care all the time about us specifically. They want what's best for them, and maybe sometimes we get pushed back into the shadows. And so suddenly trying to get the whole world's approval isn't really worth the risk at all. Because think about it this way. If you're trying to get approval from your friend, and they're trying to get approval back from you, then you're both just trying to be selfish towards yourself. You're only worried about what you can get, and the other person's only worried about what they can get. How do you expect to grow as human beings when that happens? How can you ever find your purpose? The whole reason we're on this rotating rock, how do you expect to find meaning and purpose in all of that if the only people feeding into you are also selfish and only seeking their own ambitions? The best way I can describe it to you is through this tool. Oh, wait, sorry, not that tool. The other tool. Okay, so this tool. I was on Google, and I was trying to find something, and I finally found this picture of a tool, and I have no idea what this thing does. It looks like it maybe has a little angle to it, so maybe it's a right angle. But where do you think the best place to get information on what this tool is best used for? The internet, Wikipedia, maybe. But again, going back to the original problem, if you're looking for answers for people who don't have the answers, then you're probably not getting the correct answer. If you want to know what that tool is best used for, why don't you ask the Creator? Why don't you go look at the instruction manual that maybe came with the tool? Then you would maybe see that that's not just a right angle, but a level, a compass, and all sorts of other great things. You see where I'm getting at with this? If you want to find your purpose and your meaning, then talking to other people is probably not going to give you the answer. If you want to find out what you were created specifically to do, it starts with a conversation with the Creator. It starts with getting to know the instruction manual from the Creator. One other thing, this painting. This is a more a funnier example. So this painting for a lot of people is really, really deep. Sorry, I'll go the other way so you all can see it over here too. However, there's a problem with this painting. The people who interpret it all think, well, the clocks, they're slipping away, so this guy must have been a genius because he really understands time. He sees that time is fleeting and time is slowly slipping away from us. But really, if you go back and talk to the Creator, he really just liked the looks of clocks and a way a certain cheese melted, and he thought it would be really cool if he combined the two. So it looks like this picture has this really deep meaning, but all of a sudden you talk to the Creator and he was just having fun with a couple of things that he liked. In the exact opposite way, we have to treat ourselves with our Creator. He didn't just create us to laugh at us, although I'm sure he does that on a regular basis too. I like to imagine God has just a funny reel of each and every one of us that when maybe he's disappointed in one person, he can go look at the funny reel from somebody else. It's like America's Funniest Home Videos all the time. Those of you who laughed, I guess, are old enough to have watched that on a regular basis. All the rest of you kids, maybe you've never seen America's Funniest Home Videos. However, this is the exact situation we've been talking about in Exodus chapter 2, or Exodus chapter 3 and Exodus chapter 4. Because Moses is seeking his purpose. He is seeking what he is supposed to be doing. However, he's been told from all sorts of other people what that purpose really is. And through this conversation at the burning bush over the past few days, you've seen a little bit of this kind of struggle going back and forth between Moses and God. You see, in chapter 3, we saw how amazing and powerful God is. And then at the beginning of chapter 4, we see a little bit of the start of how feeble Moses is as a leader. Because even though God gives him every piece and every little bit of tools he might need, every bit of information he might need, still Moses questions whether or not he can do it. And whether you want to admit that or not, you're probably in the exact same shoes. Because whether it's God's mission or your own personal mission, I guarantee each and every one of you, child and adult, has felt at some point in life like you're not equipped to handle whatever you've got in front of you. You have no way of moving forward without the fear of what's ahead. And Moses struggled with that exact same thing as well. In verse 10, after God has told Moses exactly what he needs to do, we talked about yesterday, here's what Moses' response was. He said, Lord, pardon your servant, but I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. And guys, I know we make that same excuse, not the exact same excuse, but I know when we are told to do something, especially when it comes to a spiritual challenge, the first thing that comes to our mind is, yes, I can do it. It's all the reasons why we're not qualified. It's all the reasons why there's no way we could ever accomplish this task. But check out what God says back to Moses. This is key. This is verse 11. Then the Lord says to him, who has made man's mouth? Who makes mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? So Moses starts off like, how am I going to speak to the Egyptians and try to get all the Israelites free when I can't even talk? I stutter all the time. And then God responds to Moses, what do you mean you stutter? I'm the one who made your mouth. I think I know whether you are qualified or not. And my friends, God is trying to tell each and every one of you the same thing. When you realize what that purpose in your life is, what that meaning truly is, and you think of all the excuses of why you can't do it, God's looking at you and said, I've already given you everything you need. I'm right here. Have you not heard how powerful I am? You see, our value and purpose has to come from this God who is so amazing. Everything that we do needs to be translated through this Creator. Because if it's translated through anybody else, we're going to miss the point entirely. The best way I can describe this to you is one more picture. Now, before you show it, too late, it's already up. Anyways, so when I show you this picture, it's going to be of a dog, okay? Some of you are going to see the dog almost instantly. Some of you might see it after a few minutes. Some of you, we're going to have to show you where the dog is. I really like this example they showed us, I think it was at the marriage night a few weeks ago, so adults, sorry if you've already seen it. How many of you guys can see the dog? Okay, good amount of you. How many of you are like, where in the world is this dog? Okay, go ahead and reveal where the dog is. You see, there's a little Dalmatian facing the opposite direction. Yeah. Now, the reason I show you this is because a lot of times your purpose and meaning are a lot like this picture. Because it's fuzzy at times. You don't really understand it, and it's hard to translate it. However, there are some people who do see what's supposed to be seen. There are people who understand your purpose. There are people who have sought our God and know what you are supposed to be doing. And it's people like that that can help you see the image that's behind you. Not just for this silly picture, but for the image of your life as well. Having the people around you that translate your life through God instead of through the world's point of view is the key to understanding what your purpose and what your meaning is. And that's why God says to Moses, I'm the one that made your mouth. Don't you understand? If you're going to fulfill this, I've already given you the tools to do it, even if you think you have a problem. And then he goes a step further in Exodus chapter 4, verse 12. He says, now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. So not only does God change his perspective and his point of view to tell him that I've made your mouth, I know what it's capable of, but I'm also going to show you. So God has the power to overcome that stuttering weakness that Moses does have. And I see this playing out in two ways in this story in your lives as well. If you were to continue reading, there's two things that happen. First was what we just read. That Moses should have taken everything that God said and said, all right, I can go back to Egypt and speak. But if you read the very next verse, you see that, again, Moses comes up with excuses, and God sends Aaron in his place. So let me recap, make that a little more simple for you. Two things happen in this verse. One we should follow, which is the first step, where God has shown you what you're supposed to do, and we should be faithful and just act out and know that God is going to be there with us, just like Moses, what he should have done. However, the second thing that he does do is continue to make excuses, and God still provides anyway. You see what I'm trying to say? See, we should act the way Moses doesn't and follow God faithfully because of who he is and what he tells us to do. But even if we don't, God still makes up for our weakness anyways and sends somebody as a helper for Moses. So guys, no matter how big your purpose or your meaning is, you can have faith and step out, or even if you don't, God is still going to get the job done. But if we want to do this, if we actually want to make the change in our life, then we've got to change the way that we're measured. We have to change the way that we see the world around us. Now, I'm not sure how your education system works, but I would guess everyone still learns in like inches and feet, right? When you're learning how to measure things. Mostly, isn't that what you use? Sometimes. But there's a whole nother system, right? Talking like centimeters and all the other meters that I didn't learn in school. Okay, so there's two different ways to measure. And there's actually more than that, but those are the two main ways that we learn how to measure. Same is true in our lives as well. There's two ways you can measure yourself. You can measure yourself with what the world has to say, or you can measure yourself with what God says about who you are. And I don't know about you guys, but I've seen this play out in my life as well. Because about 15 years ago, standing up here in front of you guys, I would have been so nervous. My knees would have been shaking. And the truth is, if I was to go out and make just a random speech or present something, I'd be nervous and stammering and stuttering. Some of you have had conversations with me, and I have a hard time getting my words out. But for some reason, when I get the chance to talk about how amazing God is, suddenly the Holy Spirit intervenes, and I feel so much more clarity in how I can speak and how I can talk, and I don't feel nervous at all. That's what it's like to be in the presence of God and having him work through you for your purpose and what you're supposed to do. Now, the only problem is I'm still human. And so I love it when people tell me how great I am still. So when I preach, I love it when people give me compliments. Going back to the whole Tony Stark problem, I have this issue where I want everybody to tell me how great I am. And so we still fall into the trap. Even when we're doing what God has called us to do, we still measure ourselves in some ways through the measure of the world by telling us, oh, look at me, I'm great. Not saying I'm actually great. I'm just saying I love for people to tell me I'm great. And you guys are the same way, right? Because even if you're like out serving in the mission field, if you're giving food to the homeless, if you're out doing what God has called you to do, it still feels really good when someone tells you that you're doing a great job. But it ain't about you, right? It feels good when the world tells you how great you are, but we have to change the way we're measured and realize that, yes, it feels good, but it feels even better to know that we are living in the presence of God and doing exactly what he's called us to do. How do we do that, though? It's easy for me to stand up here and tell you to do it, but it's harder when we get to tomorrow and you've got to figure out how to actually apply that. So you got to change the way things are measured. You've got to change the ruler. Because if I had to guess, most of you guys, and probably myself included, spend more time with how the world measures you than how God measures you. Because when I'm talking about the world, I'm watching TV, reading magazines, checking social media. I'm letting the world tell me what I'm supposed to look like, act like, be like, think like. But all the time I spend reading God's word, spending time praying with him, worshiping him, not just on this set, on the stage or at Beach Week. Talk about like in my car when I'm belting it out loud so that no one else hears me, because that's the one time no one else can hear me, and I'm really not that great of a singer. No, I'm not. You can ask Kayla, because sometimes I do it while she's in the car too, and she turns up the volume a little bit louder. But the truth is, when I'm doing those things, I'm seeing myself and I'm measuring myself against what God has called me to do. But when I'm doing those other things, I'm looking at myself the way the world does. And I measure myself against everything that they're about. And the more time you spend in this quadrant than you do in this quadrant, the more you want to look like the world and the less you want to look like Jesus. And so if you want to make that change, if you want to change tomorrow, then what you have to do, stop being over here. Spend more time in the Word. Spend more time worshiping, not just when there's a band playing, but when you're walking down the street. If you want to be worshiping God, sing whatever hymn or whatever song you feel like, as long as you're praising God, it's worship. Pray with him. Spend time with him. Memorize Scripture. If we're living that way, then suddenly we don't have to worry about what everybody else thinks. Because really it doesn't matter. Because they're just worried about themselves anyways. Why not spend time with a God who knows what you were created for? With the instruction manual that knows what you were created for. We want to be like Moses in this story and understand that God has sent us with a purpose. And he's going to get it done with or without us, whether we like it or not. But our lives can have a lot more peace if we would just lean into him and away from everything else. But I know for some of us, we still have doubts. Yeah, it's easy to read that story, and yeah, God made our mouths, but I still wonder how great God is. And so tonight I want to close with one thing. This is one of my favorite passages in all the Bible. This comes from Job chapter 38. And so if you don't know about Job, let me catch you up to speed. In Job loses everything. He's this man that has this amazing family, all this livestock. He's a really wealthy guy. He loses everything. Not just his wealth, but his children as well. They all die, and he loses everything. And he remains faithful up to one point, and finally he questions God in the same way I know many of you guys have. He looks at God and asks, why God? And here's how God responds. I want you to notice how amazing he really is, in ways that probably most of us have never thought about. This is chapter 38. I'm going to read the whole thing for you. It's a little bit long. Listen to what he says, though. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is that darkness counseled by words without knowledge? Dressed for action like a man, I will question you, and you make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you are understanding, who determines its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it on what and where its base is sunk? Or who laid its cornerstones when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut in the sea with the doors when it burst out from the womb, when I made the clouds its garment, in thick darkness its swaddling bands, and prescribed limits for it, and set bars and doors, and said that as far as you shall come and no farther, and here you shall be your proud waves and be stayed? Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the skirts of the earth, and the wicked shaken out of it? It is changed like the clay under the seal, and its features stand out like garments. From the wicked their light is withheld, and their uplifted arm is broken. Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare it and know all of this. Where is the way of the dwelling place of light, and where its place of darkness? That you may take it to its eternity, that you may discern the paths of its home. You know, for you were born then, and the number of your days is great. Have you entered the storehouses of snow, or have you seen the storehouses of the hall, which I reserve for the time and trouble, for the day of battle and war? What is the way to the place where the light is disturbed, or when the east wind is scattered upon the earth? Do you get what I'm trying to say? He goes on for all of chapter 39. How great is the God that does all those things? And if he created all those things, don't you think he created you to be even better? Remember the first 7 days. On the 6th day, he said out of all those things that he just did, that each and every one of you was the greatest. And if you are his greatest creation, why would you not listen to what he has to say about you? Ignore everything else and listen to him. Let me pray for you guys.